You! Don't touch me! I have no idea where those hands have been. Genevieve Wren recoiled as if Malachi's outstretched hand were a biohazard. Her gaze raked over him with a sneer that dismissed his presence as a stain on the Gala's marble floor. Around them, the city's elite shifted, their hushed snickers cutting sharper than the ice in their crystal flutes. Malachi stood perfectly still, his hand still suspended in the frozen air, the heat of the insult burning against the professional mask he'd spent 20 years perfecting. He didn't flinch. He let her arrogance fill the room like poisonous gas. Genevieve turned her back, laughing to her associates about unwashed intruders ruining the evening. She had no idea she'd just spat on the only man who could sign her $750 million lifeline. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The Grand Aurora Hotel's ballroom sparkled under crystal chandeliers, a sea of designer gowns and tailored suits moving beneath the golden light. Camera flashes punctuated the air like silent lightning, capturing the city's elite as they navigated the annual charity gala with practiced ease. Malachi Voss adjusted his navy suit's cuff as he entered, his presence commanding yet understated. Years of building his empire had taught him the value of quiet observation. He noted the subtle shifts in the room, the wayward glances, the whispered conversations, the careful positioning of social climbers near the evening's perceived power centers. Across the room, Genevieve Wren held court in her fitted burgundy gown, a glass of champagne dangling from her manicured fingers. Her laugh carried across the marble floor, practiced and precise, meant to draw attention without seeming to seek it. She'd positioned herself perfectly, back to the ornate fireplace, surrounded by a carefully curated circle of board members and social allies. "Ms. Wren," one of her assistants approached, speaking in low tones. "The program is about to begin." Genevieve's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. She'd expected this evening to unfold according to her careful choreography. The announcement of Voss Meridian Capital's investment presented as her triumph, with the actual CEO remaining a silent partner she could manage from afar. Finding out Malachi would be the keynote speaker had thrown her off balance, though she'd never show it. Her eyes swept the room with practiced disdain, catching sight of Malachi for the first time. She took in his presence with a dismissive glance, categorizing him as either hotel staff or an unremarkable guest. The thought that he might be anyone of consequence never crossed her mind. "Ladies and gentlemen," the event coordinator's voice filled the room through hidden speakers. "If you would all please take your seats." The assembled crowd began to drift toward their assigned tables, crystal glasses tinkling and silk rustling. Genevieve remained standing, still holding court, as others seated themselves around her. She'd chosen this table carefully, closest to the stage, where everyone could see her reaction to what she assumed would be the announcement of her company's salvation. "It is my distinct pleasure," the coordinator continued, "to introduce our surprise keynote benefactor for this evening. A man whose vision has transformed our city's infrastructure, whose investment strategies have revitalized countless communities." Genevieve's smile remained fixed, but her fingers tightened around her champagne stem. "Please welcome the CEO of Voss Meridian Capital, Mr. Malachi Voss." The applause that followed was genuine, but Genevieve's hands remained still. Her eyes widened slightly as Malachi rose from his table and made his way toward the stage. Several board members at her table shifted uncomfortably, watching her reaction from the corners of their eyes. Before ascending to the podium, Malachi paused near Genevieve's table. His approach was measured, professional, carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had earned every step of his success. He extended his hand, a gesture of basic professional courtesy. The moment stretched like pulled glass. Genevieve looked at his offered hand, as if he'd presented her with something unclean. Her upper lip curled slightly, And then came the words that seemed to freeze the air itself. "You! Don't touch me!" The sound carried just far enough to reach nearby tables. A nervous titter rose from several guests. Others suddenly found their water glasses fascinating. A photographer's camera clicked rapidly, capturing the moment in high-definition clarity. Genevieve's face shifted quickly, adding a brittle smile that did nothing to mask her initial reaction. "Personal boundaries," she murmured, loud enough to be heard, as if that explained everything. Throughout it all, Malachi's expression remained perfectly composed. His eyes, however, took in everything: the smirks, the averted gazes, the uncomfortable shifts in chairs. He noted the faces of those who laughed and those who looked away in shame. He registered the quick glances between board members, the raised eyebrows of socialites, the sudden interest from the press photographers. The silence in their immediate vicinity grew heavier, spreading outward like ripples in still water. Genevieve's smile remained fixed, but uncertainty had begun creeping into her eyes. Something in Malachi's calm felt suddenly dangerous, though she couldn't say why. With deliberate grace, Malachi withdrew his hand. The movement was smooth, unhurried, as if her reaction was precisely what he'd expected. Without a word, he turned toward the stage, leaving Genevieve standing in a silence that had become deafening. The ballroom held its breath. Glasses stopped clinking. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the photographers' cameras fell silent, as if sensing that something momentous had just occurred, though few yet understood exactly what. In that stretched moment, Genevieve's certainty began to crack. The way Malachi moved toward the stage, unbowed, unhurried, carried a weight she hadn't expected. For the first time that evening, doubt crept into her practiced poise, and she felt the uncomfortable sensation of power shifting beneath her feet. Malachi ascended the stage with measured steps, each footfall echoing through the now silent ballroom. The crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow across his composed features as he approached the podium. Behind him, the massive screens displayed the Voss Meridian Capital logo alongside the Gala's charitable causes. Genevieve remained rooted near her table, her burgundy gown catching the light as she attempted to steady her expression. Her fingers clutched her champagne glass too tightly, knuckles white against the crystal stem. Around her, board members shifted in their chairs, their gazes ping-ponging between their CEO and the man she'd just insulted. "Thank you for that warm introduction," Malachi said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the room. "And my sincere gratitude to the host committee for their tireless work in supporting our city's most vulnerable communities." He paused, allowing his words to settle over the crowd. The silence felt heavier now, charged with anticipation. Several photographers had repositioned themselves, sensing something significant was about to unfold. "Before we proceed with tonight's program, I have an important announcement to make." Malachi's tone remained perfectly level, professional. "After careful consideration, Voss Meridian Capital has decided to formally withdraw from our proposed $750 million strategic partnership with Ren Dominion Holdings, effective immediately." The reaction rippled through the room like a shockwave. Several board members physically recoiled in their seats. A woman at table 3 dropped her fork, the clatter sharp against the sudden intake of breath from those around her. At the back of the room, reporters began furiously typing on their phones. Genevieve's champagne glass trembled slightly. 2 spots of color appeared high on her cheeks as the full impact of his words registered. Her eyes darted to Harold Matthews, her CFO, who had gone absolutely still, his face ashen. Only a select few knew how desperately Ren Dominion needed this deal to shore up their over-leveraged positions. "We wish Ren Dominion continued success in their future endeavors," Malachi continued, as if he weren't announcing the potential collapse of a century-old family empire. "Now, Let us return our focus to tonight's true purpose, supporting the extraordinary work of our charitable partners. The calm in his voice made the statement devastating. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't mentioned her behavior, hadn't needed to. The connection between her public display of contempt and this financial guillotine was impossible to miss. Genevieve moved before she could stop herself, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she headed for the stage. Several guests turned to watch her approach, their expressions a mix of morbid fascination and second-hand embarrassment. The same people who had laughed nervously at her "you" moment now studied their wine glasses with intense concentration. "Mr. Voss," she called out as he stepped away from the podium. "A word in private, please." Her voice aimed for authoritative, but landed somewhere between demanding and desperate. Malachi turned to face her, his expression unchanged. "I believe we've already had our interaction for the evening, Ms. Wren." The words were polite, but carried an unmistakable finality. "You can't just—" she started, then caught herself, aware of the dozens of eyes watching. Lowering her voice, she continued, "This is a misunderstanding. The deal is too important to both our companies to let a social misstep." "Respect," Malachi interrupted quietly, "was the minimum requirement for trust." He held her gaze for a moment longer. "You made your position clear. I'm simply honoring it." Around them, the whispers had already begun. A Reuters reporter in the corner was speaking rapidly into his phone. Two board members huddled with their heads together, gesturing urgently. The stock markets wouldn't open until morning, but the news would spread through private channels within hours. Genevieve watched helplessly as Malachi descended the stage and made his way toward the exit. Several high-profile donors who had been clustered near her table earlier now found reasons to drift away. The power dynamics in the room had shifted seismically, and everyone could feel it. "What do we do?" Harold Matthews appeared at her elbow, his voice barely above a whisper. "Without this capital—" "Shut up!" Genevieve hissed, painfully aware of the reporters still watching. The reality of her situation was crashing down around her. She had just publicly demeaned the man who held her company's future in his hands. Worse, she had done it in front of witnesses, cameras, and the exact social circle whose opinion she valued above all else. The band, reading the room poorly, chose that moment to resume playing. The melody felt jarring against the tension still thick in the air. A few couples moved hesitantly to the dance floor, more to break the awkward tableau than from any genuine desire to dance. Genevieve spun toward her chief of staff, who was already approaching with a worried expression. "Find every photographer," she ordered through clenched teeth. "Every phone, every camera angle. Lock it all down before anyone can upload that footage." Her voice shook slightly. "And get me our PR team. Now!" The chief of staff nodded and rushed off, already dialing numbers. But Genevieve could see from the active screens around the room that it was probably too late. The story was already spreading, and with it, the beginning of her downfall. The wood-paneled side lounge of the Grand Aurora Hotel felt suffocating despite its generous size. Genevieve paced across the Persian carpet, her burgundy gown swishing with each turn. Lydia Sloane stood near the door, phone pressed to her ear, while two board members, James Foster and Richard Klein, sat rigid on the leather sofa. Their legal advisor, Marcus Bennett, loosened his bow tie as he flipped through messages on his tablet. "It was a simple misunderstanding," Genevieve insisted, her voice tight. "Personal boundaries, event stress. The lights, the noise. Write whatever narrative works, but fix this before the markets open." Lydia covered her phone's microphone. "I have the Chronicle's business editor on hold. He's willing to run our statement first." "Good." Genevieve stopped pacing. "Make sure he emphasizes the chaos of the event, the confusion, anything but the reality." James Foster cleared his throat. Genevieve, the covenant triggers. I know about the covenants, she snapped. The word made her stomach clench. If their lenders sensed weakness, the entire debt structure could unravel before breakfast. Meanwhile, across the emptying ballroom, Malachi sat with Evelyn Pike at their table. The remnants of dessert lay untouched before them as Evelyn made notes on her phone. Table 7, Evelyn murmured. 3 witnesses, including the former state treasurer. They heard everything. Malachi nodded slightly. Document it all. And I want a complete audit of Wren Dominion before we consider any further contact. Already arranging it. Evelyn's fingers moved swiftly across her screen. Though I suspect we'll find more than just social impropriety. Back in the side lounge, Richard Klein wiped sweat from his forehead. We should reach out to Voss directly. Apologize. Offer better terms. Better terms? Genevieve whirled on him. He humiliated me in front of the entire city elite. He planned this. Waited until we were in public to maximize the damage. Marcus Bennett looked up from his tablet. Ms. Wren, with respect, the witnesses say you initiated the... I don't care what they say. Her voice rose sharply before she caught herself. Through the lounge's glass panels, she could see guests still lingering in the ballroom. Several watched the lounge with poorly concealed interest. Lydia ended her call. The Chronicle will lead with our version, but social media is already picking up chatter. We need to move fast. Contact every friendly outlet, Genevieve ordered. I want our narrative flooding the zone before anyone else can frame this. And where's my brother? Theodore should be in here helping manage this crisis. As if summoned by his name, Theodore Wren stood visible through the glass, watching from near the bar. His expression carried years of accumulated resentment. When their eyes met, he raised his whiskey glass in a mock toast, his contempt obvious. Genevieve turned away, her hands shaking slightly. Get legal on the phone. I want to know every option for pressuring Voss to retract that announcement. Pressure him? James Foster's voice cracked. He just withdrew $750 million of vital financing. We should be begging, not threatening. I don't beg, Genevieve hissed, especially not to someone who... She cut herself off, but the unfinished sentiment hung in the air. Richard Klein stood abruptly. I need to call my broker. If this hits the morning news the way I think it will... Sit down, Genevieve commanded. Nobody leaves until we have a unified response. Lydia, what's the social media situation? Lydia scrolled through her phone, frowning. It's spreading. Several guests were filming during your interaction. Delete it. Copyright claims, privacy violations, whatever it takes. Marcus Bennett shook his head. That could backfire. Make it look like we're hiding something. We are hiding something, Genevieve snapped. We're hiding the fact that our CEO just torpedoed a critical deal because her feelings got hurt. Because you refused to shake his hand, James Foster muttered, then flinched when Genevieve turned her glare on him. The tension in the room ratcheted higher as Lydia's phone chimed. She checked the message, and her expression fell. Ms. Wren, you need to see this. Genevieve snatched the phone. On the screen was a blurry video clip, clearly shot from a donor's table. The footage showed her recoiling from Malachi's extended hand, her face twisted in disgust. The audio was muffled but clear enough. You don't touch me. Who sent this? Genevieve demanded. Margaret Whitman. She says it's already being shared in 3 different private groups. Genevieve's fingers tightened on the phone until her knuckles went white. Through the glass panels, she could see Malachi and Evelyn rising from their table, preparing to leave. He moved with the same unshakable composure he'd shown all evening, while her own carefully constructed world was unraveling thread by thread. The timestamp on the video clip read 11:57 p.m. In less than 8 hours, the markets would open, and everyone would know exactly what had happened in this ballroom. Everyone would see exactly who she was. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows of Genevieve's town car as it glided through the empty streets. She had removed her heels, letting them tumble across the leather floor, while Lydia sat beside her tapping urgently on 2 phones. "The audacity," Genevieve said, her voice sharp in the quiet cabin. "Walking into my gala like he belonged there, like generations of carefully cultivated influence, mean nothing compared to his new money." "Ms. Wren," Lydia warned, glancing at the privacy partition. "Perhaps we should discuss this tomorrow when—" "No." Genevieve grabbed the crystal decanter from the car's wet bar, sloshing amber liquid into a glass. "I want to discuss it now. Did you see how he approached? So confident, so presumptuous, as if a handshake between us would be the most natural thing in the world." Her lip curled as she took a long drink. "These people think they can buy their way into rooms that took my family a century to build. They wave around their billions like it erases every other distinction." Across town, Malachi's car moved through the same night-swept streets. Evelyn sat beside him, her laptop casting a blue glow across her face as she reviewed preliminary data. "The numbers don't track," she said, frowning at her screen. "Their desperation for this deal went beyond normal market positioning. They needed our money specifically, urgently." Malachi nodded, his reflection steady in the window. The board members' reactions confirmed it. "When I announced our withdrawal, I saw real fear, not just disappointment. Their debt structure is Byzantine," Evelyn continued. "Multiple shell companies, circular ownership patterns. It's like they were hiding something even before tonight." Back in Genevieve's car, Lydia set down both phones with deliberate care. "Ms. Wren, I need to be clear. We cannot afford any recorded statements that might inflame the situation further." "Inflame?" Genevieve laughed, a brittle sound. "I'm simply stating facts. My grandfather built half this city's skyline. My father shaped its future. Now we're supposed to pretend that anyone with sufficient funds deserves equal standing?" "The press won't see it that way," Lydia insisted. "They'll focus on the handshake, the public rejection." "Because they've lost all sense of proper order," Genevieve cut in. "When did we decide that old money and new money were identical? When did we agree that social hierarchies built over generations should bend to accommodate every ambitious outsider?" The car turned onto Park Avenue, passing darkened luxury boutiques and doorman buildings. Lydia watched Genevieve drain her glass, noting how her employer's careful public mask had cracked to reveal something colder underneath. "These spaces," Genevieve continued, gesturing at the prestigious addresses sliding past, "they mean something. They represent a legacy of influence that can't be purchased with a single transaction. Malachi Voss needs to learn where he belongs." Malachi's town car pulled up to his company's headquarters, a gleaming tower of steel and glass. In his private penthouse office, he and Evelyn immediately began coordinating with their overnight team. "Pull everything," he instructed, removing his tie as analysts' faces appeared on various screens. "Every public filing, every private document we accessed during deal preparation. I want to know exactly what we almost stepped into." Evelyn moved between workstations, directing different research streams. "Focus on their redevelopment corridor first. The displacement complaints from those neighborhoods never added up. Cross-reference all their subsidiary entities," Malachi added, "especially ones registered in the past 18 months. The office hummed with focused energy as the team dug deeper. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sparkled below, unaware of the scrutiny being applied to one of its oldest business empires. The first red flags emerged. An analyst found irregularities in how Wren Dominion had structured ownership of several major projects. Another uncovered a pattern of shell companies that seemed designed to move liabilities off their main books. "Look at this," Evelyn said, enlarging a document on the main screen. "The redevelopment corridor. They've been using numbered entities to hide the true cost of relocating residents. The public numbers are fiction." Malachi studied the data, his expression hardening. They were going to saddle us with these liabilities. The $750 million wasn't just about expansion. It was about offloading their rot onto our books. The team worked through the night, uncovering more threads of financial deception. What had begun as a social slight now pointed toward systematic corruption. The handshake rejection wasn't just about prejudice. It revealed the arrogant assumption that Malachi could be both insulted and exploited. The evidence had mounted into something undeniable. Evelyn gathered the key findings while Malachi stood at his window, watching the first hint of dawn touch the eastern sky. "The contempt makes more sense now," he said quietly. "She thought she could humiliate me publicly because she assumed we were desperate to close this deal. She never imagined I'd walk away." Evelyn finished compiling her report, her face illuminated by the screen's glow. She sent Malachi a single, urgent message. "Do not reinstate anything. Their numbers are rotten." The first rays of sunlight pierced through Genevieve's silk curtains as her phone erupted with alerts. She fumbled for it, her head still thick from too much champagne and too little sleep. The screen blazed with notifications, market warnings, urgent messages from board members, and financial news alerts about Wren Dominion holdings. "No, no, no," she muttered, sitting up in her king-sized bed. Her burgundy gown from the Gala lay crumpled on a chaise lounge, a reminder of how quickly triumph had turned to disaster. Across the city, Malachi stood in Voss Meridian's gleaming conference room, his crisp white shirt still fresh despite the sleepless night. Evelyn spread documents across the polished table, while analysts cycled through presentation screens on the wall. "The Asian markets already reacted to the news," Evelyn said, gesturing to a downward trending graph. "Wren Dominion's partners in Singapore and Hong Kong are getting nervous." Malachi nodded, studying the data. "Show me what else you found overnight." In her penthouse, Genevieve paced in a silk robe, while her hair and makeup team rushed to prepare her for an emergency video appearance. Her PR chief, Marcus, held up his tablet. "CNBC agreed to a phone interview in 10 minutes, he said. "We're positioning this as routine deal timing, nothing personal. The narrative is that both parties simply decided to reassess terms." "What about the interaction?" Genevieve asked, as a stylist pinned her hair. "If it comes up, we call it a brief social misread. Stress, loud room, simple mistake. Nothing more." Back at Voss Meridian, Evelyn pulled up a complex financial structure on the main screen. "This is where it gets interesting," she said. "The $750 million wasn't earmarked for expansion at all. Look at these debt obligations coming due." She highlighted several numbers that pulsed red. They're underwater on at least 3 major developments. The Metropolitan Corridor project alone has hidden costs of nearly $200 million. Malachi leaned closer. "Show me the displacement numbers." New slides appeared. Photographs of a historic neighborhood, mostly working-class homes and small businesses. Overlaid were statistics showing resident removals, property acquisitions, and violation notices. They used shell companies to hide the true cost of forcing people out, Evelyn explained. Pressure campaigns, targeted code enforcement, artificial property devaluation, classic predatory tactics, but buried under layers of subsidiary entities. On CNBC, Genevieve's voice carried practiced warmth as she addressed the market's concerns. "This is simply about timing and strategic fit," she assured the host. "Both Wren Dominion and Voss Meridian are exploring the best structure for any future collaboration. But, Ms. Wren, there are reports of a tense exchange at last night's charity gala," the host pressed. Genevieve laughed lightly. Oh, that! A completely overblown moment in a crowded room. Mr. Voss and I barely had time to speak. These events can be quite chaotic. In the conference room, Malachi watched her performance on mute, while another analyst presented evidence of systematic financial concealment. They needed our money to cover their positions, the analyst explained. Without the deal, they're exposed on multiple fronts. But here's the really troubling part. They were planning to shift the riskiest liabilities onto our books through the partnership structure. Evelyn pulled up the proposed agreement. If you had signed, you would have absorbed hundreds of millions in hidden obligations while they walked away clean. They weren't looking for a partner. They needed a lifeline. Malachi's jaw tightened. She expected to publicly recoil from my hand while privately depending on my money to save her company. Speaking of that moment, Evelyn said, opening a video file on her laptop, someone sent us another angle from the gala. The audio is clearer. The footage played, Genevieve's visible disgust, the "you, don't touch me," clearly audible. But then, as she turned away, her muttered words carried perfectly. People need to learn where they belong. Silence fell in the conference room. Malachi's expression didn't change, but his shoulders straightened almost imperceptibly. In her office at Wren Dominion Tower, Genevieve ended the CNBC interview and turned to the wall of financial screens. Red indicators dominated the displays. The stock had opened down 8% and was still falling. "Marcus," she snapped, "get me our major shareholders on the phone. We need to project stability." Her assistant, Emma, appeared at the door, face pale. "Ms. Wren, we're getting reports that Voss Meridian's team is conducting deep due diligence. They're not just focused on the Gala incident." "What do you mean?" Genevieve demanded. "They're reviewing everything. All our development projects, our subsidiary structures, the Metropolitan Corridor specifically." Genevieve's carefully maintained composure cracked. She gripped her desk, manicured nails pressing into the wood. For the first time since the previous night's humiliation, real fear flickered across her face. The morning sun now streamed fully through her floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating her designer office with unforgiving clarity. On her screens, the stock price continued its relentless decline, each tick downward bringing her closer to the truth she had tried to hide. Her contempt might cost her everything. Genevieve paced her executive office, her Louboutin heels clicking against the marble floor. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, but her face was dark with fury. She stabbed at her phone's screen, ending another damage control call. "Lydia!" she barked. Her chief of staff appeared instantly. "I'm done playing nice. These people need to learn there are consequences when they challenge a Wren." "What are your orders?" Lydia asked, tablet ready. "Everyone! Call everyone!" Genevieve's voice was ice. "The Times owes us after that puff piece we arranged. Call Marcus at the Herald. His daughter's fellowship came through our foundation. And get Senator Williams's office on the line. Time to remind people who their real friends are." Within hours, the first stories appeared. A business column questioned Malachi's emotional stability in withdrawing from such a major deal. A local news site ran quotes from anonymous sources describing his pattern of theatrical grievances. "Look at this," Lydia said, showing Genevieve her tablet. "Councilman Patterson is calling for an emergency review of the East Side infrastructure contract." Genevieve's lips curved into a cold smile. Perfect. Attack his business, not just his character. Make him defend everything at once. Across town at Voss Meridian's headquarters, Malachi sat in his conference room, surrounded by concerned faces. The investor calls had started immediately. "With respect, Malachi," said James Morton, one of his earliest backers, "this is becoming a circus. The Wrens fight dirty. They always have. Why risk everything over one nasty moment? Because it wasn't just a moment, Malachi replied. His voice was steady but firm. It was a symptom, and I won't sell my dignity back to someone who thinks they can purchase it after treating me like dirt. Another investor leaned forward. Nobody's saying what she did was right, but we have 3 other deals closing this quarter. The longer this drags out, then pull your money, Malachi said simply. I'll understand. But I'm not backing down. After the investors left, Evelyn entered with a stack of files. They're scared, she said. But you're right to hold firm. I have a strategy. I'm listening. 2 tracks, Evelyn explained. Publicly, we say nothing. Let them throw their tantrums. Meanwhile, we build our case methodically. I've already found some interesting patterns in their SEC filings. Malachi nodded. What kind of patterns? The kind that make their stock price look like a magic trick, Evelyn said. Numbers that don't add up. Projects that exist mainly on paper. And their debt structure? She shook her head. It's a house of cards. So, the $750 million wasn't just expansion capital, Malachi said. They needed a lifeline. Exactly. And speaking of inside information, Evelyn lowered her voice. Theodore Wren reached out through back channels. Says he wants to talk. Malachi's eyebrows rose. Genevieve's brother? The one she pushed out of operations? The same. He says he has information, but he'll only share if we're serious about taking her down completely. No half measures. It could be a trap, Malachi said. She might be using him to bait us into something illegal. Maybe, Evelyn agreed, but he sounded genuine and bitter. Said something about years of humiliation at her hands. Malachi stood and walked to his office window, looking out over the city. The same skyline he'd worked decades to help build. He thought about the phone calls he'd gotten that morning, not just from investors, but from other CEOs. Some supportive, some worried, some carefully neutral. All watching to see if someone could finally stand up to the Wren machine. You know what bothers me most, he said finally. It's not just what she did. It's that she assumed she could do it without consequences. That's not arrogance. That's experience. She's done this before, to people who couldn't fight back. So what's your call on Theodore? Evelyn asked. Malachi turned back to face her. Set up a meeting. Somewhere private, but not suspicious. Tonight, if possible. I'll arrange it, Evelyn said. But we should be prepared for anything. Agreed. Have security sweep the location first. And Evelyn? He paused. Thank you for standing with me on this. Always, she replied simply. Some fights need fighting. As Evelyn left to arrange the meeting, Malachi's phone buzzed with another media alert. A prominent columnist was now suggesting that certain CEOs were weaponizing grievance at the expense of working people's pensions. He set the phone down without reading further. Let them spin their stories. The truth would come out, one way or another. And if Theodore Wren was really ready to turn against his sister, this fight was about to enter a whole new phase. The afternoon sun slanted through his window, casting long shadows across his desk. In a few hours, he would meet Theodore and discover whether family betrayal would be his key to exposing the truth or a carefully laid trap. Until then, there was work to be done. At 8 o'clock that evening, Malachi and Evelyn sat in a private dining room at Le Petit Jardin, a discreet French restaurant far from the city's power corridors. Security had swept the space an hour earlier. Now they waited, watching Theodore Wren fidget with his water glass. He looked nothing like his polished sister. Where Genevieve cultivated an image of effortless sophistication, Theodore's expensive suit hung loosely on his frame, his tie slightly crooked. His eyes darted around the room. I appreciate you meeting so quickly, Theodore said, but we need to be careful. Genevieve has eyes everywhere. We've taken precautions, Evelyn assured him. The staff is discreet, and we have counter-surveillance in place. Malachi studied Theodore's nervous movements. Why come forward now? Because she finally went too far. Theodore's hand trembled as he reached for his water. That gala wasn't just about you. It was about her whole pattern, thinking she can crush anyone who questions her. Across town, in a private room at the Capitol Club, Genevieve held court at an emergency board dinner. Crystal glasses clinked as she worked her charm on the directors, her voice smooth as aged whiskey. "This whole situation has been blown completely out of proportion," she said, gesturing elegantly. "Mr. Voss clearly misinterpreted a simple moment of social anxiety on my part." Back at Le Petit Jardin, Theodore's bitter story spilled out. "She pushed me out 3 years ago. I was chief financial officer. Our father's wish before he died. But I started asking questions about the books." "What kind of questions?" Evelyn pressed. "Shell companies. Dozens of them." Theodore pulled out his phone, showing them a complex chart. "See these entities? They're empty boxes that hold debt. When investors or partners look at Ren Dominion's books, they don't see the full liability structure." Malachi leaned forward. "That's why she needed our deal." Theodore nodded. "The $750 million wouldn't just have funded expansion. It would have covered massive hidden losses while she walked away clean." He laughed harshly. "Classic Genevieve. Use people, then throw them away." At the Capitol Club, one of the newer directors, Robert Chen, spoke up. "What exactly happened at the gala, Genevieve? There are different versions circulating." Genevieve's smile never wavered. "Oh, it was nothing, really. I was feeling overwhelmed. You know how these events can be." Mr. Voss approached rather suddenly, and I reacted poorly to the unexpected contact. A simple misunderstanding that he's chosen to inflate into something it wasn't. The lie rolled off her tongue with practiced ease. Several directors nodded sympathetically. Back in the private dining room, Theodore revealed more documents on his tablet. "Look at the Harrison Street redevelopment project. On paper, it's all proper real estate transactions, but look closer." Evelyn studied the files. "These purchase prices are well below market value." "Because she squeezed them out," Theodore said bitterly. "Elderly homeowners, small churches, family businesses, all faced sudden code violations, tax reassessments, denied permits, until selling became their only option." "You have proof of this?" Malachi asked. "Emails, meeting minutes, internal memos discussing which properties to pressure first." Theodore's hands shook slightly. "I kept everything. I knew someday she'd go too far." Evelyn compared the documents to her own research. "The patterns match what we found. But this gives us the internal view we were missing." At the Capitol Club, Genevieve finished her performance. The directors seemed reassured, though a few still looked uncertain. As the dinner wound down, she checked her phone. No response from Theodore to any of her messages all day. Her practiced smile slipped for just a moment. She knew her brother's silences. This one felt dangerous. "Lydia!" she called sharply to her chief of staff. "Have you heard from my brother?" "No, Miss Wren. His phone goes straight to voicemail." Genevieve's perfectly manicured nails dug into her palm. "Find him. Now." Back at Le Petit Jardin, Malachi studied Theodore carefully. "Why should we trust you? This could be a trap." "Because I hate what she's become," Theodore said, his voice raw. "Our father built something real. She turned it into a shell game." He paused. "I'm not pretending to be noble. I want her to fall. But everything I've shown you is real." As the clock approached 10, Genevieve stood in her penthouse office, staring out at the city lights. Her reflection showed a face tight with fury. "Lydia!" she snapped into her phone. "I want him found before sunrise. Whatever he has, whatever he's shared, destroy it. All of it. Understood?" "Yes, Ms. Wren." "And Lydia?" When you find him." She let the threat hang unfinished. In the private dining room, Theodore gathered his documents. "There's more, but this should be enough to start. Just—" He hesitated. "Be careful. When Genevieve realizes I've turned, she'll strike hard." Malachi nodded. "We'll move quickly. Thank you for coming forward." As they prepared to leave, Evelyn's phone buzzed. She checked it and gave Malachi a significant look. Genevieve's board dinner just ended. She's already looking for Theodore. "Then we need to work fast," Malachi said. "The moment she confirms his betrayal, she'll try to discredit everything he's given us." They left through separate exits, disappearing into the night as the city's power players positioned themselves for the next day's battles. The war of reputations was about to become a war of evidence. The morning sun hadn't yet burned through the haze when Malachi's car pulled into Harrison Street. Empty storefronts lined one side, their windows covered with weathered "Coming Soon" signs bearing Ren Dominion's logo. On the other side, a few stubborn holdouts remained: a small church, a corner store, scattered homes with worn but tidy yards. Evelyn and Naomi Vale stepped out behind him. Naomi adjusted her recorder and notebook, while Evelyn reviewed Theodore's documents one last time. "Start with Mrs. Washington," Evelyn said. Theodore flagged her case specifically. They found Sarah Washington on her front porch, a proud woman in her 70s who'd lived in the same house for 40 years. Her walls needed paint, and her steps sagged, but potted flowers still brightened every window. "3 generations grew up in this house," Mrs. Washington said, serving them coffee in chipped cups. "Then last year, suddenly everything's wrong with it. Code violations every week, tax reassessments, even got cited for those flowers, if you can believe it." She spread documentation across her kitchen table: violation notices, inspection reports, threatening letters from Ren Dominion's attorneys. They offered to buy, of course. "Half what it's worth." Mrs. Washington's voice hardened. "When I refused, they said they'd condemn it. Take it anyway." Naomi photographed each document while Evelyn noted dates and reference numbers. Malachi watched Mrs. Washington's hands shake as she stacked the papers. "I saw you on the news," she said suddenly, looking at Malachi. "That fancy party where that rich lady wouldn't shake your hand. Made me laugh. She treats you like that in public. Imagine how she treats folks like us, when nobody's watching." Down the street, they found Reverend Marcus at First Baptist. The small church had served the community for 60 years. Now scaffolding covered its facade, and yellow warning tape blocked the front steps. "They said our building was structurally unsound," he explained, showing them through a side door. "Demanded immediate repairs we couldn't afford. When we applied for restoration grants, suddenly no one would work with us." Inside, sunshine streamed through stained glass onto empty pews. The structure felt solid, peaceful. "Our engineer found nothing wrong," Reverend Marcus continued, "but Ren Dominion's inspectors kept coming back. Each time, new violations, new costs, new pressure to sell." As they talked, a sleek town car pulled up outside. 2 men in expensive suits approached elderly residents across the street, folders in hand. "Genevieve's people," Evelyn muttered, already trying to contain this. They watched through the church windows as one elderly couple accepted papers with trembling hands. The men's smiles never reached their eyes. At noon, they met James Chen, whose family had run Golden Gate Market for 30 years. The store's shelves were half empty now. "First they bought the building," he explained, "said we could stay, just paying rent instead of mortgage. Then the rent tripled. When we struggled, they offered to buy our business license, said they'd relocate us to a better location. The new spot was 10 miles away. His teenage daughter worked the register, pretending not to listen, but her shoulders tensed with each word. "You know what hurt most?" James continued. "We served their construction crews every day. Those workers loved our food. But to the company, we were just an inconvenience. Throughout the afternoon, they gathered more stories. A retired teacher whose property taxes mysteriously doubled. A young mother whose rental building lost heat for weeks after her neighbors organized against displacement. A barbershop owner who found his licenses suddenly under review after speaking at a community meeting. Each story connected directly to Theodore's documents, the shell companies, the hidden pressure campaigns, the systematic dismantling of community resistance. "Look at these dates," Naomi said, spreading her notes. Every time someone refused to sell, violations started within days, the patterns unmistakable. Near sunset, they visited one last home. Rosa Martinez, 82 years old, sat in a chair by her window, surrounded by family photos and potted herbs. "You're the man from television," she said to Malachi. Her accent was thick, but her eyes were sharp. "The one she wouldn't touch." "Yes, ma'am. Many important men come here. They make promises, take pictures, look sad." She studied him carefully. "But who comes back when cameras leave? Who fights for people like us?" Malachi met her gaze. "This isn't about pity, Mrs. Martinez. It's about justice. What happened here connects directly to how they tried to deceive my company. We're not just gathering stories, we're building a case." "Pretty words," she smiled slightly. "But I watch you all day. You listen differently than others. You understand what it means to be seen as, how do they say? Inconvenient." As darkness fell, they walked back to their car. The street was quiet now, porch lights coming on one by one. "This isn't just another scandal story anymore," Naomi said, reviewing her recordings. "This is about system that's worked this way for years because no one had the power to fight back." She looked at Malachi. "Until now." Malachi gazed back at the neighborhood, at Mrs. Washington's defiant flowers, at the church's determined scaffolding, at James Chen's daughter still working the register. Behind each window was a story of dignity under siege. "Genevieve thought she could humiliate me and still profit from my money," he said quietly. "She never imagined her contempt would expose all of this." Genevieve's penthouse office gleamed like polished bone in the night skyline. She sat behind her desk, flanked by Martin Shore, her most trusted legal advisor, and Derek Walsh, a political consultant known for making problems disappear. "The redevelopment corridor is our weakness," Martin said, spreading photos from Malachi's neighborhood visit across her desk. "If he connects those displacement stories to the Gala footage, then we destroy his credibility before he can make the connection stick." Genevieve's manicured nails drummed against her desk. "What do we have?" Derek adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. "The Voss family runs several charitable organizations. Most are standard fare. Scholarships, youth programs, community grants. But there's one interesting thread. The Voss Education Foundation, chaired by his sister, Althea. The retired judge?" Genevieve leaned forward. "Yes. They process millions in scholarship funds annually. Complex financials, multiple donor streams, lots of regulatory requirements." Derek smiled thinly. "Perfect for raising questions, even if there are no real answers." Genevieve's eyes lit up. "Make the call." Across town, Malachi's driver pulled into his driveway. The house lights were on, unusual at this hour. He found Althea in his study, reading through Foundation documents at his desk. "You look tired, little brother," she said without looking up. Malachi loosened his tie. "Long day gathering stories in the redevelopment zone. Families forced out, businesses squeezed dry. And now Genevieve Wren is coming after the Foundation." That stopped him. "What?" Althea handed him a letter. "Regulatory inquiry citing anonymous concerns about our scholarship administration. They want 10 years of records by next week." Malachi's hands tightened on the paper. She's targeting family now. Did you expect anything less? Althea finally looked up. Her eyes, so like their mother's, held steel. Women like her count on one thing, that decent people will choose dignity so carefully they never hit back hard enough to matter. The foundation helps hundreds of students, and every one of them will be fine. Althea rose, straightening her jacket with the same precision she'd once adjusted her judge's robes. We've run a clean shop for 15 years. Let them look. Malachi paced the study. This isn't about finding anything real. She's trying to taint the family name, make me look vindictive. Of course she is. Althea's voice cut through his anger. She's faster at manipulation because she has no limits. The question is, what are you prepared to do about it? His phone buzzed. Evelyn Pike. Marcus Turner is wavering, she said without preamble. The risk compliance officer who confirmed the shell companies? Genevieve's people got to him. He's talking about clarifying his statement. Malachi exhaled slowly. How bad? The facts are still strong, but public perception is sliding her way. She's painting you as an aggressor, herself as a victim of misunderstanding. If Turner flips, we lose credibility on the financial fraud angle, Malachi finished. Althea watched him closely. Remember what Dad used to say? Sometimes you have to choose between looking dignified and being effective. Malachi stared out at the city lights. The same skyline that had once seemed full of possibility now felt like a web of power protecting its own. He thought of Mrs. Washington's shaking hands, of James Chen's daughter at the register, of Rosa Martinez asking who would return when cameras left. His phone buzzed again. Naomi Vale. I can break this wide open, she said. Her voice thrummed with controlled excitement. Theodore's documents, the displacement patterns, the shell companies, all of it. But I need one more source inside Ren Dominion to corroborate the internal timeline. Someone who can verify when Genevieve knew about the hidden liabilities. How long? Stories ready to run. But I need that source by tomorrow, or the whole thing falls apart. After he hung up, Althea touched his shoulder. You're thinking like a businessman. Think like a judge for a moment. What's the real crime here? Beyond the insult? The fraud? The displacement? No. Althea shook her head. The real crime is that she believes she can do all of this. Humiliate you. Abuse those families. Attack our foundation. And still end up winning because that's how the system works. She believes there are no consequences for people like her. Through the window, Malachi could see the Ren Dominion Tower piercing the night sky like a blade. In its shadow lay all those neighborhoods, all those lives treated as inconvenient to progress. So, what do you suggest? He asked quietly. Stop trying to win with perfect dignity, Althea said. Start fighting to change the system that lets her treat people this way, even if it gets messy. His phone lit up with another update. More press coverage questioning his motives, more investors getting nervous, more pressure to let it go. But beneath the noise, he heard Mrs. Martinez's voice. Who fights for people like us? The answer would have to come by dawn. Naomi Vale's newsroom hummed with careful energy. Spread across her desk, documents traced the web of Ren Dominion's deceptions. Shell company records, displaced resident testimonies, internal emails exposing years of calculated abuse. Her producer hovered nearby, watching the clock. Theodore Wren's statement is solid, Naomi said, tapping her keyboard. He's naming names, dates, specific board meetings where Genevieve concealed liabilities. Her phone lit up. Another source. A social media clip from the Gala rehearsal was gaining traction, showing Genevieve's practiced disdain before she ever met Malachi. Comments flooded in, many from prominent donors questioning their associations with Ren Dominion. At Voss Meridian, Evelyn paced Malachi's office. 3 major foundations have suspended joint projects with Genevieve since morning. Her board called an emergency session. "Any word from Marcus Turner?" Malachi asked. "Still shaky, but Theodore's evidence makes his testimony less critical now." Evelyn checked her phone. The stock is down 12%. Investors are spooked. For the first time in days, momentum seemed to shift. By early afternoon, 2 board members had called Malachi directly, asking uncomfortable questions about what else might emerge. Social circles that once protected Genevieve began stepping carefully away. Theodore arrived at Naomi's office, impeccably dressed, but nervous. "Let's finish this," he said, settling in to record his official statement. Malachi watched the city through his window, allowing himself to imagine justice finally breaking through. The familiar skyline looked different now, less like a fortress of privilege, more like a landscape that could change. His optimism lasted exactly 73 minutes. The first hit came when Genevieve's lawyers obtained an emergency injunction against Naomi's publication, citing reckless disregard for truth and malicious intent to damage market stability. Soon after, coordinated stories appeared across 3 news sites, painting Theodore as an embittered addict who had been removed from company leadership for erratic behavior years ago. Photos emerged of him outside recovery meetings. Old text messages surfaced, showing him demanding money from his sister. "They're killing his credibility," Evelyn said, scanning headlines, and they had this ready. Not long after, Genevieve's team leaked selective internal communications, suggesting Malachi had orchestrated the entire Gala confrontation. The narrative shifted. A calculated trap rather than a genuine insult, designed to pressure Wren Dominion during negotiations. Malachi's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Harrison and Reed Capital suspended their participation in an unrelated infrastructure project. Midwest Pension Partners paused to reassess a major development commitment. The damage was spreading beyond the original fight. Later, Marcus Turner officially recanted his previous statements about Wren Dominion's accounting practices. He appeared with Genevieve's chief counsel, reading a prepared statement about misunderstandings and incomplete context. Primetime news coverage turned sharply. Commentators who had questioned Genevieve that morning now wondered if Malachi had overplayed legitimate concerns and unnecessarily destabilized thousands of jobs. "They're not even arguing whether she insulted you anymore," Evelyn said bitterly. "They're debating whether you should have noticed." Genevieve's board emerged from their marathon session. The chairman stepped to a podium, silver-haired and grave. The gathered press corps leaned forward, cameras flashing. "The board of directors has completed a thorough review of recent allegations and media speculation," he intoned. "We have full confidence in Genevieve Wren's leadership and reject any suggestion of impropriety in company operations." Just like that, the lie won. Malachi sat alone in his darkened office. The same city lights that had seemed full of promise that morning now mocked him with their cold gleam. His phone kept buzzing, reporters seeking comment, investors wanting reassurance, board members suggesting strategic de-escalation. He let them go unanswered. On his desk, the stack of resident testimonies from the redevelopment zone seemed to accuse him. "Mrs." Washington's trembling voice echoed in his memory. "People like us don't usually get second chances to fight back." The skyline stretched before him, a glittering monument to power protecting its own. Somewhere in that forest of towers, Genevieve was probably celebrating, secure in her belief that money and influence could bury any truth, erase any insult, crush any opposition. His computer pinged with another news alert. "Markets steady as Wren Dominion weathers leadership challenge." The story quoted analysts praising Genevieve's steady response to unprecedented pressure. The night pressed against his windows. Each unanswered call felt like another crack in the foundation he'd spent decades building. Not just his fight against Genevieve now, but his entire company's stability seemed to waver. Near midnight, the cleaning crew's vacuum hummed in distant hallways. The sound somehow emphasized his isolation. Every apparent victory of the morning had crumbled into defeat by nightfall. Every fact had been twisted, every witness compromised, every truth buried under the weight of Genevieve's practiced lies. The darker city stared back at him, unchanged and unyielding, as his phone slowly went silent. The office felt different after midnight. Shadows pooled in corners where confidence had lived that morning. Malachi stood at his window, tie loosened, while Evelyn slumped in a leather chair nearby, both too drained to leave, but too restless to rest. "Harrison and Reed's withdrawal hits our Phoenix project hard," Evelyn said, rubbing her eyes. "We need to notify the contractors by morning." Malachi nodded heavily. The collateral damage was spreading beyond his fight with Genevieve. Real people, his people, would feel the impact of suspended projects and nervous investors. The door opened, bringing warm light from the hallway. Althea entered, carrying a cardboard tray with 3 large coffees. Her presence filled the room with quiet strength, the kind that came from decades of watching justice move at its own pace. "You both look terrible," she said, setting down the coffees. "But at least you're still standing." "Barely," Evelyn replied, reaching gratefully for a cup. Genevieve's board backing her publicly was the final blow. The market believes her now. Malachi turned from the window. "We have to consider a strategic retreat. Not because she deserves it, but because other people are paying the price for my decision to fight back. The Scholarship Foundation can weather their audit," Althea said. "Don't use me as an excuse. It's not just you. Harrison and Reed pulling out affects 300 jobs in Phoenix. Midwest Pension's pause puts the entire riverfront development at risk. My own board is getting nervous calls about contagion risk." Malachi sank into his chair, the weight of responsibility pressing down. "Maybe we find a quiet way to step back. Protect what we can." Althea set her coffee down with a sharp click. "That's exactly what she's counting on." "She's winning, Althea." "She's not winning. She's exhausting you. There's a difference." Althea leaned forward. "Power like hers survives by making principled people too tired to finish what they start. She knows most opponents will choose dignity over endurance." "This isn't about dignity anymore," Malachi argued. "Real people are getting hurt. People were already getting hurt. Those families in the redevelopment zone, the widow with the violation notices, they've been hurting for years while Genevieve played society queen with their lives." Evelyn sat up suddenly, reaching for her laptop. "Speaking of violation notices, let me check something in Theodore's files again." While she worked, Althea continued. "Remember what Dad used to say? Tired is not the same as wrong. You're exhausted, little brother. But you're not wrong." Malachi watched Evelyn's fingers flying across keys. "What are you looking for?" "The timing of certain transfers. When Genevieve started patching holes after the Gala went bad." Evelyn's voice trailed off as she concentrated. The sky outside was still pitch black, but something in the room had shifted. Althea's presence anchored them, reminding them why the fight mattered beyond one insult or one news cycle. "Here," Evelyn said suddenly. "Look at these transaction patterns." She turned her screen. Complex financial flows mapped out like constellations, but with clear patterns emerging. "After you canceled the deal, Genevieve had to move fast to cover exposed positions," Evelyn explained. "She used shell companies, yes, but the money itself had to move through regulated channels. Each transfer over $10 million triggered automatic federal reporting requirements." Malachi leaned closer. "Those can't be erased." "Or spun by PR teams," Althea added. "Numbers don't care about social influence." Evelyn nodded. "This isn't just about hidden liabilities anymore? These movements show deliberate attempts to conceal material facts from investors and regulators. The timing proves intent. A text lit up Evelyn's phone. Theodore, still awake despite the brutal day. "He has something else," she said, reading. A video file he kept in private cloud storage. From the pre-Gala strategy dinner. They waited as the file downloaded. When it opened, Genevieve's voice filled the office, crystal clear from someone's phone recording. "I don't care what his company's worth. These outsiders think they can just buy their way into rooms our family's built. Well, he can keep his self-made story. I only need his money, not his—" She laughed. "Well, certainly not his respect." The contempt in her voice was raw, unfiltered by PR coaching or social performance. This was Genevieve's true face, revealed before she ever met Malachi. "The timing matters here too," Evelyn said quietly. "This was before the gala, before any interaction. She didn't recoil from you in some misunderstood moment. She planned to take your money while despising everything you represent." Malachi stood again, but differently now. The exhaustion remained, but underneath it, something harder had crystallized. Federal reporting trails and documented premeditation, Althea mused. A better foundation than just fighting insults with insults. The first pale hint of dawn touched the eastern sky. Evelyn closed her laptop with new energy. "Now we stop reacting," she said. "Now we set the stage. She'll walk onto herself." Malachi looked at his sister, the judge who had taught him that justice required both principle and patience. He looked at Evelyn, who had found the hard evidence that could pierce Genevieve's social armor. The path forward was clearer now, not despite the dark night, but because they had endured it. "Let's get to work," he said, as sunrise began painting the tower's gold. "It's time to build something she won't see coming." Morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Genevieve's penthouse office as she reviewed the press release draft. Her perfectly manicured finger tapped against the polished mahogany desk. "Change regulatory review to standard compliance process," she told Lydia. "And add something about our commitment to community values." Lydia made the adjustments on her tablet. "The grand ballroom at the Windsor is confirmed for tomorrow morning. Guest list at 150. Genevieve smiled, savoring the return of control. Yesterday's victory with the board had restored her confidence. Now it was time to cement her narrative permanently. "Who's confirmed from the media?" she asked. "Business Journal, Metro Daily, Channel 4 and 7. The Times is sending their society columnist rather than their business desk." "Perfect. They'll focus on the social dynamics, not the tedious financial details." Genevieve stood, walking to the window. Below, the city moved with its usual morning energy, unaware of the careful choreography happening in the towers above. Across town, in a conference room at Voss Meridian, a different kind of choreography was underway. Malachi, Evelyn, Naomi, and Theodore sat surrounded by documents and laptops, mapping out their counter-move minute by minute. "Naomi, you'll need to maintain the appearance that the injunction still has you blocked," Evelyn said. "Let her think she's contained the story." Naomi nodded, typing notes. "My editor's already on board. Will look frustrated, but compliant." Theodore shifted nervously in his chair. "She'll be watching for my presence at any competing press events, which is why you won't be visible until the perfect moment," Malachi assured him. "Your evidence speaks loudest when she's already exposed herself." Evelyn pulled up a document on the main screen. "I've identified 3 board members who were never shown the complete liability reports. They're already asking uncomfortable questions after yesterday's emergency session." "Are they willing to attend her brunch?" Malachi asked. "Better. They're insisting on attending. The refinancing announcement gives them cover. They need to be there as directors." Evelyn allowed herself a small smile. "She'll read their presence as support." Back in her office, Genevieve was rehearsing key phrases with her communications director. "I've always believed in building bridges, not walls," she practiced, perfecting her concerned expression. "Which is why this recent attempt to weaponize a simple misunderstanding has been so disappointing." "Good," the director nodded. "Hit disappointing, with just a touch of sadness. You're hurt, but rising above it." Lydia interrupted with a tablet displaying market data. "Our stock's up 3 points since the board statement. Confidence is returning." "Of course it is," Genevieve said. "The market knows theater from substance. Once we announce the new financing tomorrow, this whole ugly episode becomes a footnote." At Voss Meridian, Malachi was on a secure line with federal regulators, Evelyn beside him reviewing specific document references. "The transfer patterns demonstrate clear intent," she explained. "Each movement over 10 million triggered reporting requirements, creating a documented trail of concealment." The regulatory official's voice was measured but interested. "And you can connect this directly to material misrepresentation?" The timing aligns perfectly with their public disclosures. "We've highlighted the relevant sections. We'll have observers present," the official confirmed. "Quietly, for now." Malachi ended the call and turned to Naomi. "How are we doing with the residents?" Reverend Matthews confirmed. So did Mrs. Henderson, the widow from the violation case. 3 other families, too. They understand the importance of being there in person. Theodore checked his phone. Genevieve just posted another statement through the corporate account. "She's doubling down on painting you as aggressive and reckless." "Good," Malachi said. "Let her build the stage. We'll show her what real recklessness looks like." In the early evening, Genevieve stood in her private dressing room, reviewing outfit choices for the brunch. "The Navy Suit Project's authority," she mused. "But the cream dress suggests openness, approachability." "The dress?" Lydia advised. "You want to emphasize your humanity tomorrow." "Indeed." Genevieve held the cream dress against herself in the mirror. "By this time tomorrow, we'll have repositioned the entire narrative. Malachi Voss will be revealed as an opportunist who tried to exploit social tensions for financial gain." "Speaking of Voss," Lydia checked her phone. "His office just RSVP'd for tomorrow." Genevieve's smile widened. "Perfect. He thinks showing up projects confidence, but he'll only demonstrate his poor judgment. Again." As night fell, the final invitations went out across the city. In his home office, Malachi confirmed his attendance with a simple yes. He set down his phone and looked at the skyline, thinking of all the people, from displaced residents to federal regulators, who would arrive tomorrow without appearing on Genevieve's careful guest list. "She just doesn't learn," Evelyn said, reviewing last-minute details with him. "She really believes she can smile her way through this." "She believes power protects itself," Malachi replied. "She's about to discover what happens when it doesn't." The grand ballroom at the Windsor Hotel gleamed with morning light streaming through tall windows. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic patterns across pressed white tablecloths, where mimosas waited alongside delicate pastries. Camera crews adjusted their equipment, while society photographers captured the arriving guests. Board members, financial journalists, and civic leaders all dressed for what they expected to be a triumphant return. Genevieve stood in a private anteroom, making final adjustments to her cream-colored dress. "Timing on the refinancing announcement?" she asked Lydia. 20 minutes into your remarks. Gives the morning shows enough lead time for their business segments." A soft knock at the door. 5 minutes, Ms. Wren." Genevieve took a final look in the mirror, her expression perfectly calibrated between strength and approachability. "Time to remind everyone who really runs this city." She entered the ballroom to enthusiastic applause, moving through the crowd with practiced grace. Every handshake and air kiss reflected years of social choreography. She reached the podium as the room settled. Cameras focused on her carefully composed smile. "Good morning," she began, her voice warm and measured. "Thank you all for coming today. Recent weeks have reminded me why leadership requires both vision and resilience." She paused, letting her expression suggest dignified hurt. "When misunderstandings are weaponized for personal advantage, we must rise above emotion and remember what truly matters. The thousands of jobs, families, and communities that depend on stable business leadership." Approving murmurs rippled through the audience. Several board members nodded, pleased with her tone. "That's why I'm especially grateful." Genevieve stopped mid-sentence as movement near the entrance caught her attention. Malachi Voss entered, perfectly tailored in charcoal gray, with Evelyn Pike beside him. Behind them came Naomi Vale, Theodore, and, Genevieve's breath caught, several elderly residents she recognized from the redevelopment corridor. She recovered quickly. "As I was saying, I'm grateful for this opportunity to share exciting news about Wren Dominion's future. I believe," Malachi's voice carried clearly across the room, "that future requires some context about the present." He moved forward, Evelyn and Naomi flanking him with tablets and folders ready. Genevieve gripped the podium. "This is a private corporate event." "Security! Your board members might want to see this first," Naomi said, already distributing documents to key directors. Federal filing records showing systematic concealment of liabilities through shell entities. The room's energy shifted as papers rustled and whispers spread. Evelyn stepped forward, her voice precise and devastating. The proposed $750 million deal wasn't about expansion. It was structured to offload hidden debt while maintaining existing management control. She highlighted specific transfers on the main presentation screen. Each movement over $10 million created a federal reporting trail. The pattern demonstrates clear intent to deceive. Genevieve forced a laugh. "These are complex financial arrangements being misrepresented by your own internal documents," Theodore interrupted, standing now among shocked board members. "The same documents you kept from half the board while pushing for rapid approval of the Voss Meridian deal." Camera flashes intensified. Reporters who'd come expecting a routine corporate announcement suddenly found themselves covering something very different. "Theodore is dealing with personal issues that affect his judgment," Genevieve said smoothly. But her brother wasn't finished. "3 board members never saw the complete liability reports," he continued. 5 were never informed about the true state of the redevelopment project's finances. "The redevelopment initiative is proceeding exactly as planned," Genevieve snapped, her composure cracking slightly. "Is this your plan?" An elderly woman stood, Mrs. Henderson, the widow Genevieve had tried to pressure out of her building. False violation notices, threats about eminent domain, telling us we had to accept your offers within 24 hours or lose everything. Other residents rose, each speaking briefly but powerfully about specific instances of intimidation and manipulation. Their simple, clear statements cut through corporate jargon to the human cost of Genevieve's tactics. "These are complicated urban renewal situations," Genevieve tried, but her voice had lost its authority. She watched as board members huddled over documents, their expressions darkening. Reporters were typing furiously on phones and laptops. "Mrs. Wren," called out a business reporter, "did you intentionally conceal these liabilities from potential investors?" "Are you prepared to address the federal reporting violations?" asked another. "What about the residents' allegations of systematic intimidation?" Genevieve felt control slipping away with each question. The carefully orchestrated morning was dissolving into chaos. She looked desperately toward her usual media allies, but they were too busy documenting her unraveling to offer support. "This is a coordinated attack," she declared, trying to summon her earlier poise. a vindictive response to a minor social misunderstanding. Naomi Vale stepped forward, holding up her phone. About that social misunderstanding, she nodded to the audio-visual team, who had been quietly setting up a video feed. Genevieve's eyes widened as she recognized the private dining room where she'd held her pre-gala strategy dinner. Her own voice filled the ballroom. "I don't care who this Voss person thinks he is." The massive screen flickered to life, showing an elegant private dining room bathed in warm lighting. Genevieve sat at the head of a table, wine glass in hand, her expression unguarded and contemptuous. "I don't care who this Voss person thinks he is," her recorded voice rang through the ballroom. "These rooms weren't built by people like him. They were built by families like ours. And now every nouveau riche outsider thinks they can buy their way into our world." Present-day Genevieve lunged toward the AV controls, but security, uncertain whose orders to follow, remained still. The video continued. "We just need his signature and his money," Screen Genevieve continued. "Not his respect. Not his approval. Once the deal closes, he can go back to wherever he came from." Someone in the ballroom gasped. A board member's chair scraped backward. The footage shifted to the gala itself, now shown from 3 different angles. The first captured Malachi's approach, his expression professional and dignified as he extended his hand. The second angle caught Genevieve's face in perfect clarity, the flash of disgust, the deliberate recoil. "You! Don't touch me!" The words echoed through professional-grade speakers. No distortion, no ambiguity. Several angles showed nearby guests flinching at the moment, proving its impact had been immediately clear to witnesses. Then came the later clip, caught by a donor table's microphone. People need to know where they belong. Genevieve's carefully crafted narrative of misunderstanding crumbled. There was no anxiety disorder, no sensory issue, no momentary stress, just raw contempt, caught in high definition. "Turn it off," she commanded, but her voice cracked. This is heavily edited." "The full recordings have been authenticated," Naomi said clearly. "Timestamps, metadata, multiple sources. Your dinner commentary was recorded by the venue's security system. The gala footage comes from 3 separate professional crews, plus guest phones. Board members were already huddling, faces grave. Lenders who had come expecting refinancing announcements began edging toward the exits. Genevieve watched her carefully cultivated support system disintegrating in real time. "Charles," she appealed to her board chair, "you know my commitment to this company. 20 years of leadership. 20 years of hidden liabilities," Charles replied, his face ashen as he studied the financial documents. "Risk exposure that could have bankrupted us all. And now, this." He gestured at the screen, still frozen on her expression of disgust. Her legal counsel, Thompson & Reed's top partner, quietly closed his portfolio. "Mrs. Wren, given the emerging situation, I must recuse myself from any further statements on your behalf until—" "Jeffrey, I've paid your firm millions," she hissed, "and I have a legal obligation to withdraw representation when presented with clear evidence of fraudulent—" "Evidence?" Her laugh held an edge of hysteria. "A dining room video? Some creative accounting that any major company—" "Federal reporting violations," Evelyn cut in smoothly. "Systematic concealment of material facts from board members. Documented patterns of community intimidation. And now proof that you deliberately misled everyone about the Gala incident while trying to weaponize public sympathy." Genevieve's eyes darted around the room, seeking any friendly face. But the society photographers who usually captured her best angles were now documenting her downfall. Former allies studied their phones intently, avoiding eye contact. In desperation, she moved toward Malachi, lowering her voice. "We should discuss this privately. Man to man, leader to leader." "No." His response was calm but carrying. You chose public humiliation. You'll receive public consequences. I will not be spoken to this way, she snapped, reverting to inherited authority. Do you know who I am? Yes, Malachi replied. Someone who thought power meant never having to show respect. Charles cleared his throat. Mrs. Wren, the board is prepared to vote. Vote? She whirled back to the huddle of directors. You can't possibly… Genevieve Wren, Charles continued formally, in light of documented financial misconduct and actions bringing severe reputational damage to Wren Dominion Holdings, this board hereby removes you as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately. Two men in dark suits stepped forward, presenting federal credentials. Ms. Wren, we need to discuss several irregularities in your company's recent financial disclosures. The room erupted in camera flashes. Reporters shouted questions. Genevieve stood frozen, her perfectly constructed world collapsing in real time, every carefully managed relationship deserting her at once. You can't, she whispered, but the words held no power now. This company is my life, my family's legacy, a legacy of lies, Theodore said quietly, built on treating people as beneath you. Security finally moved, not to protect Genevieve, but to ensure an orderly exit as federal officials requested she accompany them. Her designer heels clicked unevenly on the marble floor, each step taking her further from the power she'd wielded so carelessly. 3 months after Genevieve Wren's removal as CEO, the redevelopment corridor she'd tried to exploit buzzed with energy. Construction crews worked alongside local contractors. Community planning meetings had replaced backroom deals. The same streets where elderly residents once faced pressure tactics now displayed bright banners announcing, "Building our future together." Malachi stood at a simple podium on the corner of Mason and 4th Street, where Mrs. Washington's threatened church had become a cornerstone of the new project rather than a casualty of it. The morning sun warmed the gathering crowd, a mix of longtime residents, city workers, ethical investors, and media drawn by the contrast between this approach and the scandal that preceded it. The difference isn't just in the plans, Naomi Vale observed from her spot near the stage, notebook in hand. Her exposé had sparked national conversations about development, power, and accountability. It's in who's making the decisions. She was right. The planning committee included church leaders, small business owners, and elderly residents who'd fought displacement. The financing structure, crafted with Evelyn's guidance, gave the neighborhood partial ownership. Construction jobs went first to local workers. Evelyn Pike herself had become a sought-after voice on corporate reform, turning down lucrative board seats to focus on restructuring predatory deals. The money was always here, she told a documentary crew filming the event. It just needed to serve the community instead of exploiting it. Theodore Wren stood quietly at the edge of the crowd. His testimony had helped unravel his sister's schemes, though he carried his own regrets for years of enabling her. He'd declined any role in the new project, choosing instead to work with investigators to help make things right. Malachi approached the microphone as the crowd settled. Behind him, architectural renderings showed affordable housing integrated with renovated historic structures, small business incubators, community spaces, a future built on respect rather than removal. 3 months ago, he began, this corridor represented everything wrong with development. Secret deals, hidden pressures, people treated as obstacles rather than partners. He paused, letting the contrast sink in. Today, we're showing a different way forward. Mrs. Washington, the church elder who'd first shown him the human cost of Genevieve's tactics, nodded from her seat in the front row. Her dignity had never needed anyone's permission. The Wren Dominion approach failed, Malachi continued. Not just legally, but morally. They thought power meant never having to listen, never having to respect, never having to treat people as equals deserving of basic dignity. The crowd murmured in agreement. Everyone knew about Genevieve's very public disgrace. The Gala footage had become a symbol of entitled arrogance. She now faced federal proceedings without her usual shields of wealth and social connection. Her contemptuous, "You don't touch me," lived on as a warning about the cost of treating people as beneath notice. But Malachi didn't dwell on her downfall. This wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. "This project belongs to you," he told the gathered residents. "Your voices shaped it. Your knowledge improved it. Your values guide it. And your community will share in its success." He gestured to the construction site where local crews had already begun work. Every job created here prioritizes neighborhood hiring. Every small business space includes protections for existing shops. Every housing unit comes with affordability guarantees backed by transparent oversight. Evelyn stepped forward to explain the ownership structure that gave residents actual equity, not just promises. Naomi shared how similar communities across the country were studying this model. City council members who'd once backed Genevieve now praised the new approach, though Mrs. Washington's knowing smile suggested she hadn't forgotten their previous positions. "This isn't charity," Malachi emphasized. "It's partnership. It's respect made visible through action. It's proof that development can serve people rather than displace them." The applause felt different from the polite golf claps of charity galas. This was the sound of genuine hope, of dignity recognized, of justice taking tangible form. As the formal presentation ended, Malachi moved through the crowd, shaking hands with residents, contractors, and community leaders. Each gesture carried the weight of contrast. These weren't the reluctant handshakes of people seeking favors in elite spaces. They were exchanges between equals working toward shared goals in the open air. Mrs. Washington caught his eye as he reached her row. "You know," she said with a slight smile, "when you first came here, I wondered if you were just another suit making promises. But you showed up again. You listened. You put respect into action." Malachi clasped her offered hand warmly. Around them, people were already gathering for the next planning session, their voices confident and engaged. The summer sun lit the scene with natural clarity, so different from the artificial glow of chandeliers where Genevieve had once performed power. The handshakes continued, each one a quiet revolution against the idea that worth came from exclusion. Here, in simple daylight, surrounded by the community she'd dismissed, real dignity was building something lasting. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.